All right, welcome. Today we're diving into a really fascinating text that does something amazing. It blends the hard science of light with this deep sense of wonder. We're going to cover everything from why diamonds sparkle to the very nature of enlightenment itself.
So the text we're looking at kicks things off with a pretty profound question. It asks us to just stop and imagine a world of constant, endless night. And then it asks, who, other than God, could possibly bring you light? This immediately frames light as not just, a physical thing, but as this fundamental blessing that we honestly take for granted all the time.
So, what even is this light we're talking about? Well, scientifically speaking, it's a form of energy. It's the very thing that lets you see the world around you, even this screen right now, and the whole field dedicated to studying how light works and interacts with stuff, that's called optics.
Okay, so to really get a handle on light, we've got to start with a couple of basic rules. First, it loves to travel in straight lines. And second, when it hits something, it bounces. This simple act of bouncing is called reflection, and it's basically the foundation for how we see, well, pretty much everything.
And this idea that light travels in a straight line, it's so reliable. In fact, it's so reliable that scientists can shoot a laser beam from here on Earth, hit a tiny little reflector left on the moon, and time its return trip to measure the exact distance. It's just incredible.
That bounce we were talking about, it has a name, reflection. It's what happens when light smacks into a surface it can't go through, like a mirror. But here's the thing, this bounce isn't just random. No, it follows this beautifully simple and totally predictable rule. And here it is, just look how elegant that is. The angle that the light comes in at is the exact same angle that it bounces off at. It's perfect symmetry every single time.
And that simple law is exactly why you can see yourself in a mirror. Your eye sees the light bouncing off the mirror, right? But your brain is kind of hardwired to assume light always travels straight. So it traces those rays back to a point behind the mirror where they would have met. That's the virtual image. It looks real, but there's nothing actually there. It's a trick of the light.
Okay, so we've got bouncing down. That's what happens when light hits something. But what happens when it actually goes through something instead, like from the air into a pool of water? Well, that's when things get a little bent.
You've totally seen this before, right? It's the perfect example. You dip a straw or a spoon into a glass of water, and it suddenly looks like it's bent right at the surface. Well, that break you're seeing, that's a phenomenon called refraction.
So why does this happen? Well, it's all about speed. Light doesn't travel at the same speed through everything. It actually slows down when it hits something denser, like water or glass. And that sudden change in speed is what forces it to bend and change direction. And our source has this absolutely brilliant way of explaining it, the truck analogy. Imagine a truck driving off a paved road and onto sand at an angle. The first wheels that hit the sand are going to slow way down, right? But the wheels still on the road keep going fast. That difference in speed makes the whole truck pivot and turn. That's exactly what happens to a beam of light.
So, understanding how light bends isn't just a cool party trick. It is the absolute key to some of our most world-changing technologies. I'm talking about everything from the glasses on your face to the very fabric of the internet.
Now, this whole light bending thing has a really fascinating consequence called total internal reflection. If light that's inside something like glass hits the edge at a steep enough angle, it actually can't get out. Instead of bending its way out, 100% of it reflects back inside. It's like the glass turns into a perfect mirror on the inside.
Now get this, for a diamond, that special angle, the critical angle, is just 25 degrees. That's a really steep angle, which means pretty much any light that gets into a diamond gets trapped. It's forced to bounce around inside, over and over again, before it can finally escape. And all that bouncing is what creates a diamond's famous brilliant sparkle. And this is where it gets mind-blowing. The exact same principle that gives a diamond its sparkle, that's what powers the internet. Light signals, carrying all our data, are trapped inside super thin fiber optic cables, bouncing their way across oceans and continents without ever escaping. It's incredible. And of course, once we mastered bending light, we got the lens. And the lens, well, it literally opened up entire new worlds to us. It let us look up and see the unbelievably large, like when Galileo spotted the moons of Jupiter. And it let us look down to see the impossibly small, like when Leeuwenhoek discovered a hidden world of tiny microorganisms. Okay, so this is where everything we've talked about, all this physics, starts to take on a deeper meaning. The source text draws this really powerful parallel. It says, the intellect is like the eye. Until it receives light from a luminous source, it cannot see.
The idea here is that our mind is just like our eye. It needs an external source of illumination to truly understand anything.
So you see, for the author of our text, these laws of physics aren't just dry facts. They're like signposts, pointing to something deeper, something more symbolic. And they find a really interesting clue for this in language itself.
They point out this fascinating linguistic detail from the Quran. The Arabic word for light is consistently used in its singular form, but the word for darkness almost always shows up in the plural form.
So, singular light, plural darknesses. What's that all about? Well, the interpretation offered is that this is symbolic. It suggests that while there can be many different kinds of darkness, many forms of confusion and ignorance and doubt, there is only one true, unified source of light and enlightenment.
And really, that brings us to our final thought. We started with the simple physics of how light bounces and bends, and we ended with this deep metaphor for knowledge itself. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other everyday things, things we see all the time, are holding deeper secrets, just waiting for us to take a closer look.